You know, people love to say home is where you're safe. I used to believe that too. But on Kiln Road, home wasn't a safe place. It was a trap that smiled at the neighbors and locked its doors at night. Home was where the floorboards learned to keep secrets, where the walls absorbed screams that never quite made it past your throat, where safety was just another word people used when they didn't want to look too close. Home was where you learned that family could be the most dangerous word in the dictionary. My name's May Carter, though these days folks call me Miss May. I was born in 1972, right there in the mill town of Clayford, Alabama, a row of rusted houses, red dirt that stained everything it touched, and laundry lines swaying like surrender flags in the humid air. The kind of place where everybody knows your name, but nobody really knows you. Where gossip travels faster than truth, and truth gets buried under politeness and Sunday manners. Where people say, bless your heart, when they mean, I'm not going to help you. I'm 67 years old now, sitting on my porch with sweet tea sweating in the glass and a heart that's finally quiet enough to speak. If you're listening, tell me in the comments where you're from. I want to know if my story reaches beyond these dusty roads, across state lines, over oceans maybe. And if you can, give the video a like, not for me, but for every girl who thought silence was safer than truth. For every child who learned to make themselves small. For every woman who's still finding her voice in the wreckage of her childhood. Our house was the last one before the woods. You could hear the pines whisper at night, their branches scratching against my window like they were trying to warn you about something, trying to tell you secrets in a language you couldn't quite understand. Daddy worked nights at the brick plant, came home at dawn smelling of clay and beer, his boots leaving red dust trails across Mama's clean floors that she'd just mopped the evening before. She'd sweep them away without a word, like she was erasing evidence, like if she cleaned it up fast enough, she could pretend he hadn't been at the bar again. Mama kept to herself, always humming hymns too softly for anyone to hear the words. Amazing Grace and the Old Rugged Cross hummed so low they were almost just breathing. I think she was praying, but the prayers got stuck somewhere between her lips and heaven, caught in the ceiling beams with all the other words she couldn't say. And then there was Earl, my older half-brother, 8 years ahead of me, from Daddy's first marriage to a woman who'd had enough sense to leave. Everyone in town said Earl had a temper, like it was a family heirloom passed down through generations, something to be managed rather than questioned. Like saying someone had brown eyes or big feet. Just a trait. Just Earl being Earl. Nobody ever asked what that temper looked like behind closed doors. Nobody ever asked who bore the brunt of it. From the outside, we looked like any other family on that dusty road. Mama's geraniums by the window, bright red against the white paint she touched up every spring. The church dresses ironed every Saturday night, hanging in a row like good intentions on wooden hangers. Daddy's truck parked neat in the driveway, washed every Sunday after church. Sunday dinners with sweet potato pie and green beans cooked with fatback. Christmas lights in December, Easter eggs in April. But behind closed doors, Kiln Road had rules that didn't come from God. Rules written in silence and enforced with turned heads. Rules that said don't ask, don't tell, don't make a fuss, don't air dirty laundry. Rules that protected the wrong people and sacrificed the innocent. The first time I realized something was wrong, I was 9 years old, still young enough to believe adults would fix things. I heard Mama whisper to Daddy in the kitchen late one night, her voice tight and scared, shaking in a way I'd never heard before. Don't leave her alone with him. The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and choking. I was supposed to be asleep, but I'd crept to the top of the stairs because I'd heard them arguing. Daddy's answer was the sound of a chair scraping back, harsh against the linoleum, violent in its suddenness. He's family. Don't start with your nonsense. Just like that, my safety was dismissed as nonsense. Women's worries, feminine hysteria, making something out of nothing. After that conversation, she stopped warning. Just watched. always watching with those tired eyes that had seen too much and said too little, eyes that followed me around the house like a ghost's. Earl had a way of filling a room until you disappeared inside his shadow. His presence was like a storm cloud, heavy and threatening, blocking out all the light and air. You could feel him before you saw him, feel the shift in atmosphere when he entered a space. He'd sit on my bed sometimes, the mattress dipping under his weight, saying he just wanted to talk. But his talk had weight to it, pressure, expectation, demands that weren't spoken but understood. I learned to keep my eyes on the floor, counting the knots in the wooden boards. My voice small, barely a whisper. My footsteps quiet, avoiding the squeaky spots. I learned to read moods like other kids read books, studying every shift in tone, every movement, every facial expression, trying to predict the weather of his temperament so I could take shelter before the storm hit. Mama would pass by the doorway, dish towel in hand or laundry basket balanced on her hip, mouth pressed tight as a sealed envelope. She'd pause for just a second, and I could feel her looking, could feel her decision to keep walking. Once, just once, she came in after he left. She sat on the edge of my bed and whispered, "Just get through it, baby. It'll pass." Her hand smoothed my hair and I could feel her trembling. But time doesn't heal what keeps happening. Time just teaches you to endure, to survive, to build walls inside yourself where you can hide the parts of you that are still soft and breakable. At school, I was the shy girl with perfect attendance and no friends. Teachers called me well-behaved and quiet, like those were compliments, like being invisible was an achievement. Nobody asked why a 10-year-old girl flinched at sudden movements or why I ate lunch alone in the corner of the cafeteria, back against the wall so I could see everyone coming. Nobody wondered why I never joined kickball at recess, why I volunteered to clean the chalkboard erasers, anything to stay inside where it was predictable and safe. My teacher, Mrs. Henderson, once asked why I never looked people in the eye. I told her, "It's easier to stay out of trouble that way." She smiled, thinking it was a joke, maybe even wisdom from a shy child. She patted my head and said, "You're such a good girl, May." She didn't understand it was a survival strategy learned in the trenches of my own home, that eye contact meant attention, and attention was dangerous. By 14, I'd learned every squeaky floorboard in that house like a musician knows her instrument. Third step from the top, left side. Fifth plank in the hallway, right by the bathroom door. The loose board by the kitchen that groaned under any weight. I knew how to make myself invisible, how to breathe quietly through my nose so my breath didn't make sound, how to become a ghost in my own life. I could move through that house like smoke, leaving no trace, making no impression. But invisibility doesn't save you forever. It just delays the inevitable while eating away at who you might have been, consuming the girl you could have become if you'd been allowed to take up space. The house had a rhythm I learned to dance to, a dangerous choreography I perfected. Daddy's shift changes, 3 to 11 most nights. Mama's shopping days, every Thursday afternoon at 2. Earl's unpredictable hours, the worst kind because you could never fully relax. I planned my existence around their schedules, carving out moments of peace in the gaps between their presence. I'd hide in the closet with a flashlight and library books, reading about girls who had adventures, who were brave, who lived in worlds where home actually meant safety. Anne of Green Gables, Little Women, Nancy Drew solving mysteries in a world that made sense. Those books were my windows to a different life, proof that somewhere beyond Kiln Road, things could be different. That other girls got to be heroes instead of victims. One night in summer, fireflies blinking in the darkness, I overheard Daddy bragging at the bar, his voice carrying through the screen door as I sat on the porch steps, trying to find stars in the light-polluted sky. My boy's a man now. Works hard, knows how to handle himself. Chip off the old block. Pride in his voice, talking about Earl like he was some kind of prize, some kind of success story. And I realized then that men like my daddy chose blindness. They chose to believe what was comfortable over what was true. They chose their own sons over their daughter's safety, every single time, because admitting the truth would mean admitting their own failures. The next morning, watching the sun come up bloody and red over the fields, I decided I wouldn't survive another year on Kiln Road. Something in me shifted from endurance to determination, from surviving to planning my escape, from victim to architect of my own future. There was one person who saw me, really saw me, Mrs. Lottie, the woman who ran the corner store with its creaky wooden floors and smell of penny candy and dust. Widow in her 60s, sharp-tongued, with kind eyes that noticed everything, that caught what others missed. She saw the things I tried to hide. Years passed like seasons, each one teaching me something new about survival and then about living. And there's a difference between those two things, a gulf as wide as the one between Clayford and Birmingham. The shop grew, gained a reputation, became a place women knew they could go. My hands aged, gaining calluses and laugh lines where needle pricks had healed. And I learned to laugh again. Real laughter, the kind that comes from your belly instead of your throat, that shakes your shoulders and brings tears to your eyes for good reasons. People called me Miss May, the lady who can fix anything. But some things aren't meant to be fixed, only carried gently until they stop hurting. Some wounds become scars you learn to live with. Part of your story rather than the end of it. Part of who you are rather than all of what defines you. I never went back to Kiln Road. Not for decades. Not for Daddy's funeral. Not for Mama's. I built a life that faced forward, that didn't look back over its shoulder, that refused to be haunted. But last year, an old neighbor, Shirley Jenkins, who used to bring us tomatoes from her garden every August, who probably knew more than she ever said, called the shop. Her voice was older, wavering with age and something like regret. "Did you hear, May? The brick plant's closing. The whole town's moving out. Clayford's dying." For a moment, I almost said I was sorry. The words rose to my lips like a reflex. But I wasn't sorry. Some places deserve to fade. Some names deserve to be forgotten. Some towns that protected the wrong people deserve to become dust. Still, that night I dreamed of Mama, standing on that sagging porch, watching me disappear down the road, the morning light on her face making her look young again, hopeful again like the girl in the photo she'd given me. I like to think she finally found peace too. Maybe in letting me go she found her own kind of freedom. Maybe my escape was her escape too, in the only way she knew how. You ever notice how peace has a sound? For me, it's the hum of a sewing machine. That steady rhythm, not too loud, not too soft, mechanical and purposeful, the kind of sound that fills the silence without stirring old ghosts. It's mechanical and human at once, purposeful, creating something with every rotation, every stitch adding to something larger. For years, that hum was my heartbeat, proof I was still here, still working, still building something worth keeping. Life in Birmingham wasn't easy, but it was mine. No fists coming out of nowhere. No shouting that made your stomach clench. No locked doors keeping you trapped instead of safe. No walking on eggshells or reading moods for survival. Just work, rent, bills, ordinary problems that felt like blessings. And slow healing. The kind of healing that happens so gradually you don't notice until one day you realize you haven't flinched at a raised voice. Haven't planned an escape route from a room. Haven't checked over your shoulder in weeks. By the mid-90s, my shop had become a safe stop for women who didn't know where else to go. They found me through whispered recommendations, through shelter workers who knew my story, through that underground network women create when they need help because the official channels have failed them. I'd see the look in their eyes, that mix of fear and exhaustion, hope and desperation, determination and doubt all at once. And I'd recognize it right away. Recognize it like looking in a mirror 20 years ago. It was the same look I'd worn at 15, the same expression I'd practiced hiding from the world. Sometimes they'd say, "Miss May, it's not that bad." He doesn't mean it. It's just stress. It's just... And I'd nod, because I used to say the same thing. Those exact words, that exact justification, that same desperate attempt to make sense of senseless violence. But I'd always add, "When you're ready, honey, the door's open. No judgment, no questions. Just help if you want it." A few came back months later. Bruises faded to yellow, then gone, babies on their hips, hope flickering again like a candle relit after a long darkness. Others disappeared into whatever future they were running toward, and I'd never know if they made it. I kept their names written on scraps of fabric, tied together with ribbon. My little prayer chain. My way of remembering that every woman who walked through my door mattered. Whether I saw her again or not. In 1997, a man in a gray suit came into my shop with a torn jacket, looking lost in my neighborhood. He looked too polished for my side of town. Shiny shoes that reflected light, expensive watch, the kind of put-together appearance that usually meant he'd taken a wrong turn, or his GPS had failed him. "Can you fix this?" he asked, holding out the sleeve where the seam had split clean through. "I can fix almost anything," I said, smiling, taking the jacket to examine the damage in better light. He laughed, a soft, honest laugh that crinkled his eyes at the corners, and came back a week later, not for the jacket, but for conversation. His name was Daniel Price, an accountant recently divorced, trying to start over just like me, only a few decades younger and from a different kind of broken. His marriage had ended, mine had never begun, but we were both building new lives from old wounds. For a long time, I didn't trust men's kindness. It always felt like bait, like there had to be something beneath it, some expectation or demand waiting to surface once you let your guard down. But Daniel was different. He talked, but he also listened, really listened in that rare way where you can tell someone is hearing not just your words, but your meaning. He never asked about my past, never pried into old wounds, just asked about my dreams, my goals, what I wanted to build, who I wanted to become. And that's how healing sneaks up on you. Not in big moments or dramatic revelations, but in quiet ones, over coffee and small talk, in ordinary kindness repeated until it becomes trust, until one day you realize you're not afraid anymore. We became friends. Real friends, the kind I'd never had with a man before, the kind where there's no power imbalance, no fear underneath the surface. He helped me with the shop's paperwork, taught me how to file taxes properly, how to keep books that made sense to the IRS. I taught him how to thread a needle without stabbing himself, how to mend his own shirts, how to see the artistry in the practical. Fair trade, I'd say, and we'd laugh. In 2001, after years of friendship, we started something new together. Stitch Forward, a small program teaching sewing and bookkeeping to single mothers and teen girls aging out of foster care. Girls who were running just like I had, who needed skills and hope and someone to believe in them, who needed proof that survival was possible. It began in my shop's back room with 4 women and 2 old Singer machines, cramped and hot in the Alabama summer but full of possibility. Within 5 years, we had 20 students, a waiting list 3 pages long, funding from local churches and businesses who believed in second chances. The local paper called me the seamstress of second chances. I laughed when I read it, the headline seeming too grand, too poetic for someone who just sewed for a living. But deep down, I liked the sound. It felt true. It felt earned, like a title I'd stitched together one day at a time. Then, one August morning, humid and still, I got a letter, postmarked Clayford, Alabama. I hadn't seen that name in 40 years, and seeing it on the envelope made my hands shake, made my heart race like I was 15 again and running. I almost dropped it, almost threw it in the trash without opening it. It was from the town clerk, official and impersonal. "We are contacting surviving relatives for next of kin purposes regarding the estate of Earl Carter. Deceased." I sat there for a long time at my kitchen table, coffee going cold, the hum of the sewing machine in the next room fading into silence, the world narrowing to those words. Dead. The word felt strange in my mouth when I whispered it aloud, tasted strange, felt unreal. Part of me wanted to throw the letter away, burn it in the sink, pretend it never came, pretend he'd never existed. Another part, the part that still had a 9-year-old's heartbeat, that still remembered everything in vivid detail, needed to see. Needed closure or confirmation or just proof that the monster was really gone, that he couldn't hurt anyone anymore. So I went back. After 40 years of running, I went back. Clayford was smaller than I remembered, half empty now, dying slowly like something bleeding out. The brick plant stood silent, windows broken by kids or time, parking lot cracked and overtaken by weeds pushing up through the pavement. The corner store boarded up, Mrs. Lottie long gone to whatever reward good people get when they leave this world. The road was cracked, weeds pushing through the red dirt like nature reclaiming what people had abandoned. Our old house sagged like it was tired of keeping secrets, the porch rails broken and dangerous, paint peeling in long strips, geraniums long dead, replaced by nothing but dirt and memory. Inside, dust thick as fog, coating everything in gray, muting everything. In the corner, incredibly, impossibly, Mama's sewing machine, rusted but still standing, still there like a faithful guardian waiting for her return. For the first time standing in that house, in that place that had defined my nightmares for decades, I didn't feel fear, just sadness for a girl who once thought she'd never get out, who couldn't imagine this moment of return as a survivor, as someone who'd made something of herself. "You don't talk much, do you, May?" she'd say, sliding me an extra piece of candy across the counter, her weathered hands gentle, deliberate. One day in October, leaves turning gold outside, she caught me shaking so hard I dropped the change, coins scattering across the floor like my composure, rolling into corners. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry, didn't make me explain, just said calm as anything. "If you ever need a ride out of here, I leave for Birmingham every Wednesday morning at 6 to buy supplies. Always room for one more." That sentence became my lifeline, a rope thrown into dark water, something to hold on to when drowning felt inevitable. It took months to plan my escape, months of careful, quiet preparation, of thinking through every detail, every possibility. I hid a few dollars from grocery trips, folded them under the lining of my shoe where nobody would think to look. $1 here, quarters there, building my freedom one coin at a time. I memorized the Wednesday bus schedule like scripture. Every departure time, every route, every connection that would take me further from Clayford. I packed and repacked a small bag in my mind, weighing what mattered against what I could carry. What do you take when you're leaving your whole life behind? What can you hold in 2 hands that represents everything you are? The night before I left, Mama came into my room around midnight. I wasn't sleeping, hadn't been sleeping well for years. She stood by the door, wringing her hands like she was trying to squeeze courage from her own skin, trying to wring out words that wouldn't come. "I know," she whispered. 2 words that contained everything: acknowledgement, apology, helplessness, love, regret, blessing. My throat closed up, tears hot behind my eyes. "You can't stop him," I said, and it wasn't an accusation, just a fact we both had to face, a truth we'd been dancing around my whole life. "I can't stop him," she agreed, and her voice broke on the admission, cracked like old china. "But maybe you can stop it for yourself." She handed me a small tin that used to hold cookies, its edges worn smooth from years of handling, her sewing kit, a photo of her as a girl looking hopeful and unbroken, eyes bright with dreams not yet crushed, and a crumpled $5 bill she must have been saving for months, hidden in her underwear drawer or tucked inside a recipe book. "Go," she said, and it came out like a prayer, like a benediction. Go before the sun does. It was the bravest thing she ever did, letting me leave, giving me permission to save myself when she couldn't, when she'd been trapped too long in her own prison to remember how doors worked. At dawn, when the world was gray and soft and the roosters were just starting to call, I walked down Kiln Road barefoot, my shoes tied together by the laces so they wouldn't make noise against the pavement, wouldn't alert anyone to my leaving. The red dust clung to my skin like goodbye, like the road itself was trying to hold me back one last time, marking me as its own. The morning air was thick with pine and possibility, dew-heavy and electric with change. And with every step I felt lighter, like I was shedding the weight of that house board by board, brick by brick, memory by memory. Mrs. Lottie's truck waited by the store, engine already running, exhaust smoking in the cool air. She didn't ask, didn't speak, didn't make me explain or justify. Just opened the passenger door and said, "Get in, child." 3 words that changed my life. 3 words that meant someone believed me without hearing the whole story. By the time Daddy realized I was gone, probably around lunchtime when I didn't come down to fix his sandwich, the fields had already swallowed the road behind us. I watched Clayford disappear in the side mirror, getting smaller and smaller until it was just a smudge on the horizon, and then nothing at all. Gone like it had never existed. Birmingham smelled like iron and possibility, like sweat and hope mixed together in the humid air, like exhaust and fryer grease and freedom. The city was bigger than anything I'd ever seen. Buildings that touched the sky, streets that went on forever in every direction. People who didn't know my name or my story or my family's secrets. I could be anyone here. I could start over. I could invent myself from scratch. I stayed with Mrs. Lottie for 2 weeks in her small apartment above a hardware store, sleeping on her couch under a quilt her mother had made, trying to understand this new world where I didn't have to listen for footsteps or lock my door or plan escape routes. Before long, she found me work, washing dishes at a cafe on the edge of downtown, a greasy spoon called Ruthie's that served breakfast all day. The owner, a tired woman named Ruth with flour perpetually in her hair and kindness in her eyes despite everything life had thrown at her, paid in cash, no questions asked. She took one look at me, 15 and skinny and scared, and said, "You running from something or running to something?" I thought about it for a long moment and said, "Both." She nodded, satisfied with the honesty. "Good, that's the best kind of running, the kind with purpose." I slept in the supply room on an old cot that smelled like bleach and coffee grounds, kept my bag by the door just in case. Old habits die hard when survival depends on being ready to run. Those first months were survival in its purest form. 1 meal a day, usually eggs and toast from the cafe. Cheap soap from the dollar store that dried out my skin. Constant fear that someone would find me, that Daddy would show up demanding I come home, that the police would drag me back because I was still a minor, and the law protected parents, not children. But no one came. I was a ghost who learned how to live, invisible in a different way now, anonymous in a city of strangers instead of silent in a house of family. And anonymous felt like freedom. The cafe became my anchor in rough waters. I learned the rhythm of breakfast rush, the symphony of orders being called out and plates being served. Lunch crowd with its own tempo. Dinner service slower and quieter. I learned which customers tipped well and which ones needed extra kindness in their coffee, who wanted to talk and who wanted to be left alone. Ruth taught me how to crack eggs one-handed, how to read an order ticket at a glance, how to move fast in a tight kitchen without breaking things or burning yourself. She never asked about my past, but sometimes she'd look at me with understanding that went bone deep and say, "You're doing good, kid. Real good." Those words meant more than she knew, more than any compliment about my work. They meant I was surviving. I was making it. I hadn't been wrong to run. By 17, after 2 years of the supply room cot, I'd moved into a boarding house for girls who'd left home too soon. 6 of us in 3 rooms, sharing everything: clothes, food, stories, survival strategies, dreams of something better. The matron, Miss Ida, was a large woman with a larger heart, the kind of woman who could love with the fierceness of a mother bear. She took me under her wing like a mother hen with a lost chick. "Learn a trade," she said one evening, sitting on my narrow bed, her weight making the springs creak and groan. "Something nobody can take from you. Something that'll feed you when times get hard. Men can leave, money can disappear, houses can burn down. But a skill? That's yours forever." So I learned to sew. Not just patch holes or hem pants, but create dresses from nothing, transform fabric into dreams, make something beautiful from raw materials. Fabric became my language, thread my second voice, the needle my pen writing stories in cloth and color. Miss Ida had an old Singer machine in the basement, black and gold, still beautiful despite the rust creeping along its edges. She taught me on that machine, her patient hands guiding mine, showing me how tension worked, how to read patterns, how to see 3 dimensions in flat paper. "Every stitch tells a story," she'd say, her voice low and serious. "Make yours worth reading." I practiced on old sheets, scraps from the thrift store, mistakes that I'd unpick with tiny scissors and try again. My fingers bled at first, pricked by needles and rough from handling fabric, but they healed tougher, developed calluses that told their own story. I learned that creation requires small wounds, small sacrifices, small acts of courage repeated until they become skill. In 1990, after saving for 3 years, living on almost nothing, I opened a tiny alterations shop downtown, May's Stitch and Mend. The sign was crooked, painted by hand because I couldn't afford a professional one. Letters slightly uneven, but full of hope. The floor was uneven too, sloping toward the back where water had damaged the foundation years ago. The walls needed paint, the front window had a crack in one corner. But it was mine. Every stitch, every thread, every customer, mine. My name on the door, my rules inside, my life built from nothing but determination and an old sewing machine. Word spread slowly at first, then faster. Not just about my sewing, though I was good, but my listening. Women came in for hems and stayed to cry, to tell their stories in whispered confessions over the hum of the sewing machine. I kept a box under the counter with notes from girls who'd run away, numbers for shelters that actually helped, and bus fare folded into paper cranes. Because I knew what it meant to have one person believe you. I knew the power of a single open door, a single kind word, a single lifeline thrown into darkness. I walked to the porch, boards creaking under my feet, and whispered to the ghosts, to the memory of Mama, to the girl I used to be. I made it, Mama. I really made it. I got out and I lived and I helped others live too. I didn't stay long, just enough to bury one last thing. The little tin she gave me that night, with the photo inside showing her young and hopeful. I left it under the oak tree in the backyard, buried it like planting a seed, said a prayer to whoever was listening, and let the wind take the rest. Let it all go, finally. When I came home to Birmingham, the city welcomed me back like an embrace, like coming home to a place that had always been home. I added a new class to the Stitch Forward program, the Kiln Road Fund. Every year, we give one girl a full scholarship to any trade or college program she wants. No essays required, no perfect grades needed, no proving she's worthy or deserving. Just a story and a dream. The first recipient was a shy 17-year-old named Tasha, skinny and scared like I'd been, who wanted to be a mechanic. "You sure you don't want to sew instead?" I teased, testing her commitment. And she grinned, that fierce grin of someone who knows exactly what they want. "I want to fix engines, Miss May. Big ones. The kind that power buses and trucks." I hugged her tight, feeling like I was hugging my younger self, giving her what I'd needed. "Then go fix the world, baby. Fix it loud and don't apologize." These days I sit here on my porch, same as always. Only now the hum I hear is the city. Buses groaning past on their routes. Children's laughter from the playground across the street. Dogs barking. Neighbors calling greetings. The rhythm of a life rebuilt brick by brick, stitch by stitch, day by day. Daniel passed a few years back. Peaceful in his sleep, still wearing that gray suit even in the hospital, proper to the end. I miss him daily, miss his laugh and his quiet kindness, but I'm grateful for every conversation, every quiet moment, every proof that good men exist, that trust is possible. The shop runs on its own now. My girls, our girls, handle it beautifully, better than I ever did maybe. Sometimes they call to tell me about the new students, the new lives starting with needle and thread, and I hear the pride in their voices. And I think, that's what freedom sounds like. That's what breaking cycles sounds like. That's what home should have always been, a place where people build each other up instead of tearing each other down. If you're still watching, thank you for listening to an old woman's tale. Thank you for giving me your time, your attention, your witness. Thank you for letting me speak the words I kept silent for so long. If you're living your own version of Kiln Road, if someone's telling you that you'll never make it, that you don't deserve better, that this is just how things are, that family is everything even when family is poison, listen to me. You do deserve better. You can make it out. You will survive this. The first stitch is always the hardest, the scariest, the one that requires the most courage. But once you start, you'll realize you've been holding the thread all along. You've had the power all along, the strength, the worth. You just needed permission to use it, and I'm giving you that permission right now. I'm telling you to run. I'm telling you to save yourself, because nobody else will do it for you. So tell me, where are you watching from? Drop a comment, let me know your city, your state, your country, your story if you want to share it. Maybe, just maybe, the sound of my story will reach your town too. Will reach across miles and mountains and oceans. And you'll remember that miracles aren't born perfect and whole. They're made. They're stitched together from broken pieces, from courage and fear mixed together, from one foot in front of the other even when you're barefoot on a dusty road at dawn. One stitch at a time, one day at a time, one breath at a time. My name is May Carter and I'm still here. Still stitching. Still believing that every ending can be the start of something better. Still believing that home isn't where you're born, but where you finally learn to breathe.